Madam President, today I want to speak to the issue of our southern border because I think it's a really important and relevant issue with respect to the national security package that we're considering, or that will be, I think, at some point considering here in the Senate, that deals with many of the national security crises we face around the world. And as I think about this issue, I'm always reminded that, as a one generation removed from immigrant individual in this country, my grandfather came here back in 1906, I'm reminded that we are a nation of immigrants. We've had, throughout our history, a welcoming culture in this country. We are a country that's made up of people from all over the world, and I'm representative of that, as I said, one generation removed. It's also important to remember that we are a nation of laws, first and foremost. And, Ronald Reagan once said a nation without borders is not a nation. Or I've heard it paraphrased that a nation that can't control its borders can't control its destiny. And I believe that to be true, Madam President. And I think what we have right now at our southern border is a situation that's just run amok. It really has. You cannot defend, you cannot defend what is happening at our southern border if you believe we're a nation of laws. Or for that matter, if you believe we're a nation of immigrants. Because you have to have a legal way to get into this country. All countries do that. And the United States, as I said, is a very welcoming nation. If you look at the number of people who come here every year as refugees, the number of people coming to this country, you add up all the other countries around the world, and the number of people that they allow into their countries, the United States exceeds that. And that, to me, is a remarkable testament to the welcoming nature of this country. But it's welcoming in the sense that it's done within the context of the rule of law. And that, first and foremost, has to be front and center as we think about this issue. And what we have right now at our southern border is essentially a huge welcome sign, a huge green light to come across our southern border and to do it illegally. And that is in direct contradiction and violation of everything that our nation is about as a nation of laws. And so, as I talk about this issue, Madam President, and we talk about it in the context of national security, it has become a national security issue because, once again, there's been another record set when it comes to the border, and not the good kind, I should say, of record. This administration now has, during the month of October, seen 240,980 individuals be apprehended attempting to illegally cross our southern border. That is the worst October on record, and that's on top of the three previous months, which were historic records. Month of September, 270,000 people apprehended at our southern border trying to come into the country illegally. So the highest October number ever recorded. And those are just the individuals, I would remind people, that were apprehended. The month of October saw an average of 1,000 gotaways per day, individuals that the Border Patrol saw but was unable to apprehend. That's another 30,000 people, unidentified individuals, entering our country in just 1 month. And there's no telling how many unknown gotaways there were during that same period. And Madam President, it suggests a situation at our southern border is completely and totally out of control. The closing of the fiscal year in September marked the third successive record-breaking year of illegal immigration at our southern border under the Biden administration. And as the October numbers point out, the end of this crisis is nowhere in sight. And if you think about it, the problems here are really too many to count. The men and women of the Border Patrol are under incredible strain and have been for pretty much the entirety of the Biden administration. Border cities are struggling to deal with the ceaseless influx of migrants, and major cities in other areas of the country are now discovering what border cities have been going through. And just as a point of fact, big cities, City of New York, the mayor of New York announced that he will be freezing the hiring of police officers in New York, closing libraries, and cutting education funding. This is in New York City to deal with the migrant crisis. absent an infusion of federal dollars coming in from Washington, D.C. So this is creating not problems just on our southern border, but for communities all across this country, including the largest communities in the United States of America. The situation we currently have in front of us is encouraging migrants to undertake the dangerous journey to our southern border, and sometimes with tragic results. And so I say, Madam President, that our national security is in jeopardy because a border security problem is a national security problem. And this isn't a matter of speculation. We know for a fact that dangerous individuals are attempting to make their way across our southern border every month. During fiscal year 2023, 169 individuals on the terrorist watch list were apprehended attempting to illegally cross our southern border. This is 2023, fiscal year 2023, 169 people on the terrorist watch list trying to come across our southern border. 18 in the month of September, another 13 in the month of October. Those are the people that are apprehended at the southern border. That doesn't count the gotaways. And my assumption is if they're on the terrorist watch list, they're going to be pretty good at evading the authorities, meaning that there are people trying to come into this country on a daily basis who are on the terrorist watch list. And on top of that, you have thousands of what they call special interest aliens, and those are individuals that may pose a threat to the United States that have been apprehended at our southern border over the past 2 years. Thousands of special interest aliens. And again, the numbers we have refer only to those who've been apprehended. As I said, last month alone, 30,000 identified individuals made their way illegally into our country. I should say unidentified individuals. In other words, the gotaways, the unknowns. Many of them may simply have been seeking a better life. That's entirely possible. But it's not only possible, but I would say likely, that some of them were dangerous individuals who should not be entering our country. Madam President, this work period, we expect to take up supplemental spending legislation to address national security priorities, notably support for our allies like Israel and Ukraine. And some national security priority, and one national security priority that this legislation must address is border security. As the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel reminds us, national security requires constant vigilance. And our nation is simply not secure as long as we're dealing with a massive flow of illegal immigration at our southern border. We must get this crisis under control. Senators Graham, Langford, and Cotton have been working to craft a set of border security measures for inclusion in the National Security Supplemental, focused on the two areas in obvious need of reform: parole and asylum. Under our current asylum system, a large percentage of individuals claiming asylum are released into the interior of the country after initial screening with court dates up to a decade later. The Associated Press reported that in March, 77% of individuals claiming asylum passed the initial screening. In practice, this means that thousands of individuals who've entered our country illegally and end up taking residence in our country, possibly for a number of years, given our immigration court backlog. That's a problem. And our parole system is in trouble as well. In fiscal year 2022, the Biden administration granted parole to 417,326 individuals. And that's because the Biden Department of Homeland Security has instituted an overly permissive application of parole, which means that, again, tens of thousands who have not been granted legal status and who may not have a case for remaining in the United States have been taking up residence in our country with instructions to report back a year or more into the future for further review of their status. Now, given the backlog and overwhelmed nature of our parole system, this ends up being de facto permanent residence. And needless to say, this invites abuse. And individuals are availing themselves of these flawed policies to gain entry to our nation. And any supplemental legislation must not only deal with border security generally, but with our asylum and parole system specifically, if we want to get the crisis at our southern border under control. Madam President, our porous southern border is a massive national security vulnerability. Republicans know it, and while they may not always admit it, I think my Democrat colleagues know it as well. It's time for them to act on that knowledge and join Republicans to pass real border security measures as part of the National Security Supplemental. Madam President, I yield the floor.